Your stage. Welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. You always make me feel shy, almost. We also are the city when it's not only about lean, etc. We also have the best failures. So maybe for next year we could do a presentation about the best failures we have, because we like to make mistakes in Amsterdam as well. First of all, I would like to make a compliment to the senator actually, and then everybody who knows me a bit. This is not because I like hierarchy, but actually was very impressed by the vision Berlin has on what's happening actually, the whole impact that digitalization had. And I heard the word natürlich for like 5 times, so it's not even in discussion here anymore that this is happening, which is a tremendous step, I would say, with regards to 5 years ago. First of all, when you talk about the future and roadmaps of smart cities, it would be good to look a bit to history. I would say, in a lot of perspectives, nothing new. We've having discussions like this probably for the last 5, 6, 7,000 years. When the wheel was invented 4,000 years before Christ, probably we had discussions like this about the impact of the invention of the wheel on agriculture, on pottery. Well, actually, these are the 2 only industries I know that were there 4,000 before Christ, but probably more or less the same like this. And then we had steam engines popping in, and then we spoke about steam engines and the impact of it. But why do we need steam engines? We have windmills, etc. And then we had electricity coming in, and we thought, well, we have steam engines, so we don't need electricity. And nowadays we have the internet, and we think, do we really need this? Do we really need the internet, digitalization? Do we really need to do this? It's a bit of a discussion about the agriculture sector 4,000 years ago. Do we really need the wheel? Probably it would have been better for local economy not having any wheels. You can have your own little garden, etc. But in the end, we do like the wheel, isn't it? So same thing with the internet. So we shouldn't spend too much time on, is this going to happen? Is this really needed, etc. Because it's going to happen. We're in the age where everything will be changing. And the interesting thing is the invention of all these technologies, the wheel, cars, but also electricity, energy sources, etc. Is that it's not only changing, well, the city as it is right now, it's changing economy, obviously. It's changing social structures. And for the first time in history, actually, we're at a tipping point where these changes are not anymore about more centralization, not about building bigger entities, but it's about distributing networks, it's about distributing society. In the platform economy, where we're going, all these things we did in the industrial era, centralizing stuff, centralized point of knowledge. The mayor of the city used to be the boss of all the data, and he could make a decision. The CEO of the company used to be the place where all the data came together, paper trails going up the hill. It's getting a bit different, isn't it? Data is everywhere. So in terms of big dynamics, the interesting thing with regards to industrial era and the digital era, that we now can talk about decentralization, about distributed networks, about platforms. And we should have discussions like this to see, hey, what's the impact of this to society? Because technology, and that's my second point, technology is not autonomous. We create it, we invent it, we set the rules. And this is quite a bit of a responsibility, I would say. When cars came into our cities, we needed to invent, well, rules for traffic. We needed to invent the concept of parking lots. We needed to invent parking garages, etc., etc. Parking permits later on, a whole system of inventions to facilitate this new technology. How are we going to set the rules for this digital era? And this is quite complicated, because I think we need to reinvent a whole bunch of things or apply stuff we do already in a different way. So how can we talk about, I like the example of smart traffic lights, which is the smart city example for the last, well, I would say 150 years, it feels like. But the problem is about this, why do we need lampposts? We used to have lampposts to have these little gas lights hanging to it. Well, why not when you want to measure air quality? Why not start to measure air quality? Because we don't need lampposts anymore, because with LED lights you can integrate it in whatever you want to. So when we start to think about paradigm shift, trying to make my point over here, is that we shouldn't upgrade the stuff we have already because it's there already. We should have, well, the opportunity, the space in our heads to redefine paradigms. So why not build a city without lampposts and measure air quality with a little sensor in the wall, which is a logical place to put one. When we talk about reframing paradigms, it's also about, things like ownership, roles of the government, roles of companies. Who owns the algorithms in an energy grid? Who decides what part of the city will lose the electricity when there's an outage? Because software decides what part of the city will be disconnected nowadays. Algorithms need to be programmed in advance. Your algorithm for your car needs to decide if you go to a tree or you hit a wall or you're going to hit something else or somebody jumps into the street. Algorithms decide what part of the city will be disconnected from the energy grid when there's a lack of energy. Who's going to program this and what will be the decision about this? Are we going to disconnect the areas in the city first where there are a lot of elderly people because they're going to die anyhow? Do we going to disconnect parts of the city where there are young people because they probably won't die? Or do we disconnect the business district because there's a lot of money? Are we going to disconnect the poor parts of the city because there's not much money anyhow? So how does this work? How can we program algorithms making these decisions in advance? And I'm having a lot of ethical discussions about these things lately with people from all over the world. And the essence is, at random probably is the answer we have right now. So we put in a dice into the algorithms. So Intellectual 2017 ends up with a dice and at random. So I think there's a lot of work for us to do because it shows for me that we're not ready to understand what's the true impact of the internet because we can't even program a decent algorithm to make these decisions for us. And there's more. We talk about things like, I mentioned before, privacy, data, etc. I don't think we need to have a discussion about privacy. It's an issue. We need to have a discussion about human rights. What are your human rights in the digital era? What are your human rights when it comes to data? Who has the right to collect your data? Do you have the right to know? Do companies have the right to use it to make decisions? When they know that you live unhealthy, higher taxes is obviously an example you hear quite a bit. Who has the right to work with your data? I think this is a human rights discussion, not a privacy discussion. Because privacy is just a symptom, but the real discussion should be on a higher level, actually. And I believe, and like we try to do in Amsterdam right now, is that we made a register of all the sensors in the city, basically, from the idea that you have the right to know that people capture your data. We will keep capturing data probably because if you give new services, new products, etc., we all want probably. But you have the right to know that people collect your data. So this is a typical example of an issue you need to solve in a digital era. How can we come to a discussion that we can start about democracy and algorithms? How can we come to a discussion where we can talk about human rights? How can we come to a discussion about the new role of the government? And that's my third point. Third point is we need a new type of government. The CEO of ING Bank nowadays says, I'm not a CEO of a bank anymore. We're not a 28th bank in the world. We're the third fintech company because we are a fintech company. I would say we need new type of organization that are GovTech type of organizations. Doesn't mean we need a government. We need a new type of government. A government that's designed by the principles of a digital era, where we operate in a way that we can cope with the movement that the digital age is going to bring us. A government that's not inventing stuff like a 45-hour work week, a union, all the things we invented in the industrial era, but a government that will invent solutions for the 21st century. Which probably is not, so we need to find a new word. So my challenge to you, let's find a new word for government, because otherwise we have the image of the traditional government as we have it right now. Like when I say a bank, everybody has this idea of a bank. And nobody thinks of the Berlin Development Bank, which is a great bank I learned yesterday. But it's something different. So we need to reinvent, you told me, yeah? So we need to reinvent the whole concept of the government, I think. So hopefully in your heads there will be the space to, get rid of the idea of a lamppost and add a sensor to it. Because we don't need a government that's a lamppost and add a sensor to it. We need to redesign, I would say, the function of organizing stuff collectively. So hopefully you will find some space in your head today to not only incrementally improve the stuff we do, but also take liberty about, hey, what if we would take a bit more distance and start to reinvent the government as it is right now? So 3 points. First of all, it's not that new what we're trying to do. So, this meeting is important, but we've been doing this the whole time. We can do this. Secondly, there are a whole bunch of new challenges we need to solve, where we did different people. I like the idea to involve ethics, philosophers. This is not only about technology. And thirdly, I think we need a new type of government. GovX, whatever, give it a name. Thank you.